appreciate you coming. Why have this stuff if you don't share it with people? That's what I say. And lots of things going on here in the shop, which I'm getting ready for different shows this year. In Monterey in August, I'll have 5 cars up there. And so it takes time to get them ready. Some of the cars haven't run for a year or so. Luckily next door, which we'll go to a little later, I have a chassis dyno, so we get to run them before we get up there and look like we don't know what we're doing. And 2 of them will be in the historic group, which will be the 1908 Locomobile, and next door is a 1920 Ford Raggio, and then the Indy cars, they have a class for Indy cars. One of them will be the Gould Cam 1 car that Cuba set on the pole in 78 and finished second. And then there's 2 cars next door that will be there in that same year period. And so, and you see the shop, 3 people work here full time during the week, and fabricators and mechanics, and then a fellow that keeps the place up. And so you just give you an idea that some people have said some things, well, what did you do? What's this? What's that? So I thought I was born in Los Angeles, in California Hospital. I'm one of 9 children of my dad, Emmett and Louise Malloy, and I was my mother's favorite.
Me too. She only had one.
I was the smartest, the best looking, and the most humble.
Join the club.
And so anyway, unfortunately we're down to 4 now. The way, as we know, it's the way it goes. He came from Iowa, New Hampton, Iowa, and my mother came from Ireland, and they met in Inglewood, where we all grew up. I went to Loyola High School, and I went to St. John Chrysostom in Inglewood, Loyola High School in Los Angeles, and the University of San Francisco for my undergraduate degree. My dad was an excavating contractor, and you'll see some of his stuff around, his pictures of his tractors, and I just fell in love with all that stuff, and wanted to be like him, a contractor, and the next thing you know, he builds a racetrack, down in Gardena. Actually, he got hooked into that, if I could say it that way. These guys who were building the racetrack, known as Gardena Bowl at the time, hired him and his machinery to do some work. And the next thing you know, they got so deep into it that they owed him more money than the whole thing was worth, and couldn't pay the bill. So he ended up owning the racetrack on Judge Carroll's property, Carroll Speedway, it turned out. I basically grew up, when I wasn't in school, I was at the racetrack. There was no pickup truck that he had down there that I got to drive as early as I could see over the steering wheel. And he and I made a deal that I could drive that pickup truck anytime I wanted to on the property and around the track. We'll roll in and do this stuff as long as I never took it out of low gear. If I catch you out of low gear, you won't drive till you're 21. I mean, till you're 16. And that was his deal. And there was absolutely no racing. I could not drive a race car. I was forbidden to drive a race car. And then he passed away young of lung cancer. And I was continuing on contracting. And for some reason, not too long after he passed away, I was just kind of fumbling and bumbling around. It wasn't the same as it was before, and I was looking for other things to do. I had this equipment that I was still running. I didn't really care I had a job that I did, that I got the job, and then it took 4 months for it to get started, and I told the guy I didn't want to do it. My wife said, I said, I don't know what's wrong, because this is something I've always wanted to do. She says, I think you lost your most fierce competitor. Blaming my dad. So OSHA came along, and I was putting sewers and storm drains in and heavy construction, and OSHA came along with a set of standards for safety in trenches. and I started a business called Trench Shoring Company. And that was 1973. He passed away in 71. And it's all these devices you put down in trenches to keep them from caving in. We don't do the work, we just furnish the equipment. And as you drive down the street, if you drive over a steel plate, it's probably one of mine. And I hesitate a little bit to say one of mine because about 6 years ago, my wife and I we have 4 children and 11 grandchildren, and we turned the business over to our children. Our oldest son has been running it for probably 20 plus years. When I turned it over to him, there were 5 locations, now there's 11. So he hasn't let any grass grow underneath his feet. And we're very proud of the 4 of them, 2 daughters and 2 sons, because they're very involved in the company, understand it. As you can tell, Kevin has done a heck of a job with it. And I stay completely away from it. I don't have anything to, I maybe make a suggestion from time to time, but I'm very limited in my advice unless it's asked for. And so we have a very good relationship that way with family. These buildings are mine. I came out here 40 years ago and bought dirt and built all these buildings, and there's 5 acres across the way to build 2 more buildings. But interestingly enough, you brought up all the technology and stuff. We all talk about that. A company came up to me here about 6 months ago. He wants to rent a whole 5 acres for 20 years, dirt, to put batteries on it, to store electricity. Craziest stuff, and the stuff that happens is just, you just don't know where it's coming from. I mean, and so anyway, that's a little bit about myself. People ask, I wonder what he did or what he didn't do, so Trench Shoring Company has been, a huge part of the success of the family, and looks like it's going to keep on going. My oldest daughter is 59. Her brother, the one that runs the thing, is 57. It's hard to believe that Sharon and I are going to have a daughter that's 60 years old one of these days. I mean, it's frightening. And we're going to be great grandparents in September, I think. Wow. So that's kind of strange too.
We don't get older.
The first car I started collecting in '92. The first car I bought was the orange and black car number 33. The reason I bought that is in 1988, it's an 86 March owned by A.J. Foyt. He ran it in 86, Davy Jones drove it in 87, Rocky Moran drove it in 1988 and 89. You'll see a picture on the wall around here someplace, that car with a Trench Shoring Company logo on it. Rocky Moran and I were good friends, and I helped sponsor him in 1988. Had nothing to do with it in 89. Foyt had a 3-day auction at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, 3 days to get rid of all this stuff. And the last day, there were literally 2 auctions going on at one time. If you wanted something over there, you had to send somebody over there while you were over here. That's how much stuff and because I helped sponsor that car in '88, I bought it in '92 at his sale. And that was my first car. And then I brought it home and started playing with it.